Greetings and welcome to a very special episode of Gothic Homemaking. Let me show you something. These are Komodo dragons. Not real ones, of course. If they were real, I wouldn't have my hand anywhere near their mouths because, contrary to popular opinion, I am not as stupid as I look. Shut your dusty gob. In any case, recently I was lucky enough to be able to travel to Indonesia in search of the world's only real living dragons that we know of. Won't you join me on this most epic adventure? Not you. It all started with an internet search for Komodo tour companies. In the process, I stumbled upon this tour company called Komodo Memorable Tour. Their website showed that they offered tours to various destinations in Indonesia, and that included seeing Komodo dragons. The tour I selected was a 2-day, 1-night live-aboard tour, where you sleep on the boat that takes you there. My one reservation was that at the time this company had no reviews on TripAdvisor, or anywhere else for that matter. Now that might seem like a leap of faith, but let me tell you how I chose this company. You see, many tour companies offer private live-on-board tours of Komodo. There's usually a 2-person minimum, and I was traveling alone. Of all of the companies I reached out to, some of them didn't reply at all. Some of them replied and told me that I'd have to pay for 2 people even though I was alone. And then there was Komodo Memorable Tour. First of all, they replied to all of my questions in a really timely fashion. And above and beyond that, they agreed to let me rent out the whole boat for about the price of 1.5 people, which I thought was more than fair. The only thing left to do was to pay for the trip. A representative of Komodo Memorable Tour met me at the Seoul Hotel in Denpasar, Bali. Letting a total stranger run my card for a largish amount in the lobby of a foreign hotel was a bit nerve-wracking. But by the end of this episode, you'll see that I made the right choice.
Okay, trip is paid for.
Trip is paid for.
I guess we're going to Komodo.
Komodo tomorrow.
See some dragons.
So the next morning, I left Bali on Wings Air, a subsidiary of Lion Airlines, and about an hour and a half later, I was landing on the beautiful island of Flores. I landed in the city of Labuan Bajo, which serves as the point of embarkation for most trips to Komodo. There I was met by a driver and Gonzalo, an English-speaking guide sent by Memorable Tour.
Hello!
They drove me down to the port of Labuan Bajo and asked if I needed to pick up provisions along the way.
Alcohol I have.
Like a cigarette maybe?
Cigarettes I have.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't have mixers, so I stopped to get some Coke Zero.
I'm ready for my sponsorship, Coca-Cola. Bring the money.
Gonzalo picked up snorkel gear in my size and we were off. I warned these guys I'd be filming the whole trip and that they might become internet famous.
Gonzalo looking for a girl from America.
No problem.
Just kidding.
And then we met our boat. She wasn't the prettiest lady I'd ever seen, but she was our lady, so we'd love and respect and protect her on our journey.
We are on board.
Hello!
Gonzalo.
I'm Gonzalo.
Is this the name of the boat?
Yeah, Arkilea boat.
Arkilea, what does
Yes.
that mean?
Arkilea, it's mean you can cross to the big waves. Yes.
So hopefully the waves aren't too big.
Yes. So hopefully the weather is going well.
We'll
Yes.
see. We'll see. Sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. It started from this docking board aboard this tiny ship. The mate was a mighty sailing man, the skipper brave and sure. I think it's one passenger that sailed that day for a 2-day tour.
Yeah.
That handsome 25-year-old in the purple shirt was our captain, Basri. Also on board was his first mate and our ship's cook. Our anchor, which looked like something Thor would use to vanquish giants with, was pulled on board and we were on our way. Unfortunately, a weather advisory issued by the government would prohibit us from going to Komodo itself. Rough seas caused by the erupting of Anak Krakatau had already capsized another boat, so we'd be going instead to Rincha Island, where ironically, it's more likely to spot Komodo dragons. Along the way, there was time for snacks like these Flores bananas, which are quite sweet while they're green. On our journey, we passed some of the 17,000 islands that make up the Indonesian archipelago. And I have it on very good authority that something truly magical happens every night in this mangrove forest, but you're going to see that later. About 2 hours after leaving the port of Labuan Bajo, we were pulling into the Komodo National Park Ranger Station on Rinca Island. That's our ship's cook there lassoing us into the jetty. He made some of the most delicious meals I had while in Indonesia, and I'm pretty sure they were cooked on a hot plate. He's also pretty good with a rope. I found this sign amusing considering we were about to enter a land inhabited by dragons. Gonzalo and I walked the plank onto Rinca Island, which as you can see isn't spelled quite like it sounds to us foreigners. Minutes later, we were entering the Komodo National Park. The terrain here is different and it seems almost like a desert. We were met by the remains of a buffalo a Komodo dragon had eaten 2 weeks earlier. This place is of course a World Heritage Site, as these creatures can only be found on a couple of islands in the whole world. Gonzalo left me in the capable hands of Park Ranger Mr. Mohammed Adis. He gave me the choice of a long trek, a medium trek, and a short trek. Sadly, we'd only have time for the medium trek. Along the way, we spotted these indigenous deer, which as you might imagine, are a staple of the Komodo dragon's diet. Speaking of which, dragons weren't hard to spot. They tend to congregate around the ranger station for reasons I'll tell you later. This male here that looks like he's mating is actually just trying to steal some warmth from that female. They're cold-blooded animals, so they'll take heat from wherever they can. Had it been mating season, there likely wouldn't have been any dragons here to see, as they tend to be off fighting rivals and mating. I would later realize that this would be the only footage I'd get of a dragon in motion. Because they're cold-blooded, they tend to conserve energy and lay around lethargically, sunning themselves, kind of like this one here. The cynic in me wondered if they were drugged or purposely overfed, but I was assured by various people that they congregate here because they smell the food inside. And when I went in for a closer look at this crow, and nearly stepped on this Komodo dragon, I was assured that it would have likely been the end of my trip to Indonesia.
It just, when you come, they want to smell you, they just waiting, you lost control. They're always watching you when come, yeah? And then, you have to tell us when you menstruation, because the ranger, now they know how to do, yeah?
Because the dragons smell the blood.
Of course. They can smell at 5 kilometers away. They become local when smell the blood.
Really?
They become aggressive.
Very aggressive.
Yeah.
So if a woman has her menstruation, she has to tell the park rangers.
You can need 2 or 2 rangers.
Really? 2 rangers.
Wow, I sincerely feel for you ladies. I can't even bring myself to tell my partner when I have to poop. Speaking of which, we saw plenty of this along the way. And the producers of these mounds are buffalo, like this one, who gave us a legendary case of jungle side-eye upon our approach. These buffalo are not indigenous to Rinca. They were brought hundreds of years ago, probably by Portuguese settlers, but they now roam wild in the area and are another staple of the dragon diet. And they are big, believe me. It was very intimidating to be in its presence. Komodo dragons know that too. They don't take one down at once. They will bite one and they will follow it for 2 days as the bacteria from the bite kills them. And then they will move in for the feast, as seen in these photos Gonzalo took on a previous trip. For now, this buffalo is safe, certainly from me, as I was kind of terrified of it, apparently for good reason.
But if we go down there, he will attack us.
And they will attack us. Yeah, don't go down.
Yeah, don't go down. And that's no bull.
Further proof that these dragons are not the lethargic, harmless creatures they pretend to be could be found on this tree. Locals have taken to adorning it with the remains of Komodo dragon victims. Decorating with skulls is definitely something we've seen here on Gothic Homemaking, so this tree seemed to fit right into the aesthetic. Since the dragons are at the top of the food chain, pretty much everything in this forest is a potential dragon meal, including this monkey. Can you spot him? No wonder he kept his distance and watched us trepidatiously from afar. I'd be nervous too if I lived here. Our trek then took us out of the bush and up into the hills.
I don't know how hot it is here, but I feel like I've gone from the jungle to a desert. It's really quite hot and quite dry. And I'm getting a workout. Thank you, dragons.
We found more evidence of Komodo dragon carnage in these matching buffalo hooves. They'd make for a great souvenir. but as this is a national park, everything goes right back where we found it. Our trek having come to an end, we followed the buffalo tracks back to the ranger station. The trail they use here is actually an old buffalo trail, which ingeniously makes it easier to spot animals along the way. You'll be happy to know that our friend the deer was still alive and well, so he gets to graze another day. At the souvenir shop there were plenty of tiny dragons, and a real one lurking just outside. We thanked Mr. Mohammed Adis, and Gonzalo and I worked our way across the tortured landscape, waved goodbye to the buffalo carcasses, and headed back to the boat. There, the ship's cook had prepared a delicious meal of curry fish and stir-fried tempeh.
And then the rains came.
Now, not everyone is fond of torrential rain, but I'm glad I came when I did. We saw no one else on our trek through the Komodo National Park, but if you go during the dry season, I'm told it's absolutely packed with tourists. So I'll take a bit of rain instead. The rain's calmed, we pulled into Rincha village for a look around.
We've just left Komodo National Forest where, truth be told, the Komodo dragons, they look very sedate. They're not sedated, but they look very sedate. It'd be nice to see one in the wild. There's a cave here that we could visit, but Gonzalo's afraid. He's too afraid to go. It's just a lizard. It's not a big deal. It's just a little gecko.
Oh no.
So the cave is allegedly full of Komodo dragons today because it's raining and they go there to get out of the rain. So apparently it's a bad idea for us to go. What can you do? Not get eaten.
Gonzalo and I took a walk through Rincha village, admiring its chickens and goats. It's a fishing village where the locals make their living catching fish and drying them on these screens. I stumbled upon a cemetery, and as a goth, I just had to investigate.
Gonzalo says 30% of the people buried here were eaten by lizards. It's not true.
True.
It's true, really?
Yes.
You're not just trying to fool a
No,
foreigner?
I'm not joke, yeah.
Stupid boulet. So that's what he says. He says 30% of the people buried here are the casualty of giant lizards. So watch your step. The dragons come into the village to eat these goats. But sometimes they eat the people.
There was an older gentleman selling these souvenirs, and I brought up the topic of the cave with him. Before I knew it, he was walking us to the local authority on Komodo dragons. He introduced us to Nerman, a local guide and ranger who agreed to take us to the cave. Special Komodo dragon sticks were bestowed upon the two local guides who would lead us.
You might find this hard to believe, but I actually find it really difficult to be pushy. I don't like to be pushy, especially in foreign lands where I may not understand the culture. But being a tiny little bit pushy today seemed to have paid off because we are going to the cave after all, with two gentlemen holding the kinds of sticks that you use to ward off Komodo dragons. Hopefully we won't need them. Oh, jeez! You got me, you jerk. In case you're wondering, that was Gonzalo grabbing my leg from behind as if he was a Komodo dragon. And it worked. I jumped and I squealed like a little baby girl.
5 months ago, one local people here get bitten by Komodo in the leg and in the hand.
And do they kill people sometimes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes people die because so many blood come out from the body.
Right.
And then they die directly.
And is the bite poisonous?
Yeah. Komodo dragon, not like a snake. Therefore, very poisonous. Just Komodo just have bacteria.
Bacteria?
Yeah, the bacteria, they can kill our antibody.
Oh.
But depend how big bite. When it's big bite, and then we can come out and this blood come out for the body. Right. So many, and then people will die.
This area is a favorite spot of the dragons as they're drawn to the smell of fish being packed here every morning. And so our trek to the cave began.
I've somehow ended up in the back of the queue here, pulling up the rear, as they say, which is probably a really bad idea, because I don't have a stick. I got you.
As you know by now, I'm a cynic, so if I'm not certain about something, I'm going to ask questions and get some corroborating evidence when I can.
Why do the Komodo dragons like to hang around the buildings at the park?
Yeah, they come from the jungle because they smell the food from the kitchen, from the building, from the ranger kitchen.
So they don't feed them?
Nobody feed them, they just smell. And then also they don't all the time from the building. From the
Oh
kitchen,
yeah, sometimes they're not there at all.
Yeah.
This area that we walked through is completely underwater during high tide. And as we hiked up into the hills, we spotted coral because once upon a time, this whole island was underwater. I found the trek strenuous, as is evidenced from the heavy breathing that permeates these scenes, but the views were certainly worth it.
We lost?
No.
No. Well, I'm breathing very heavily. You look fine. You look fine. I'm wearing very, very big boots and you're wearing sandals, so these guys, I think you do this very often. I'm good for this.
I will not lie, the trek was humbling. The footage doesn't really do justice to the steep climbs and how incredibly hot and humid the air was. But truth be told, I'm probably just grossly out of shape.
These guys are leaving me in the dust, but I have to keep up because to get left behind here is to be eaten.
And then we heard bats.
Must be close.
At long last, we found the entrance to the cave. I think you'll be very surprised to find out what we encountered in that cave, and you can find out what it is when part 2 of Dragons of Komodo airs, coming soon, right here on Gothic Homemaking.